Hello, and welcome to another episode of Mindset, Money, Success. And I'm your host, Loraine Marshall. And today I'm going to go over a subject that has affected my life for the past 5 years. And that subject is post-separation abuse. And so what I'm going to do is just ask questions and answer the questions. So I have 7 questions that I'm going to go over and give the answers.
Hello, it's Loraine here. And before we get into today's podcast, let me tell you about school. It's the all-in-one platform that coaches, trainers and creators like us use to share content, engage our audience and build recurring revenue. Whether you're through free membership or paid subscriptions, think $10 to $50 a month or even high-ticket upsells. School makes it stupidly simple. There's highly engaged communities, no more ghost towns. Charge monthly or keep it free, you decide. 0 hidden fees. It's just $99 a month after your first 14-day free trial, and you can cancel at any time. Unlimited members, courses and content, all with mobile app to keep your community connected. And the best part, you own the relationship. No algorithms burying your posts, just your people, your content, your revenue. Are you ready to build your empire? You can grab a free trial and I'll drop the link in the show notes or below the video. Let's get you paid for what you already know.
First question is, what is the difference between post-separation abuse, often labelled as high conflict divorce, and the typical post-breakup disagreement? First of all, on the post-breakup disagreement, usually couples can sort things out. There might be some heated discussions, but normally a couple can come to some solution over the breakup. So possessions, the home, the children, the financial settlement can all be agreed in some way. And usually if between the couple, they might attempt alternative dispute resolution or mediation and negotiation, either using a mediation company or through separate solicitors, and avoid altogether litigation and the courts. So if they can't agree on their terms themselves, the best route is obviously to use mediation to settle things. Now, with the post-separation abuse, or what's termed high conflict divorces, that is where a couple end up where one party in that relationship is set on taking litigation from the start, because they can't agree, or that person is the high conflict personality who has always been dominant, has always been in control, and doesn't allow the other party any say in the end of the relationship or any discussion or any negotiation. In fact, they lay the law down. It's their way or no way at all. And so that is when quite often you get into the situation of this high conflict divorce. And it can obviously be quite traumatic for the person who is the weaker economic party, because a lot of the time they don't have the money to move forward with legal representation. And this is a huge problem. Most of the time, the weaker party in the relationship is obviously the woman. And this is how I discovered that the relationship I had been in had actually been abusive, but I didn't recognize all of the red flags. And so at the end of that relationship, when there was a breakdown due to his cheating, then I was prepared to negotiate on a settlement that he had offered, only I didn't get any of that opportunity. And so this is where the difference between married and unmarried couples come in, because the law, the family laws, cover married relationships, and 9 times out of 10 they can go through the court process and the judge can look at what's happened and then rule on a financial settlement for the weaker party so that they are secured. But in the laws of the UK and across quite a lot of Europe, unmarried women and couples in cohabiting and living together arrangements are not covered unless they have a prior written agreement. And so it's very difficult to negotiate or go into a litigation with no law that backs it up, no law that would say, yes, this person is entitled to X, Y, Z. So it's all built on trust. So that is the difference between a post-separation abuse situation and just an ordinary post-breakup arrangement or disagreement. What are some of the most common forms of abuse post-separation? Well, firstly, when a relationship that has been abusive breaks down, that can be a very dangerous situation for the victim, because if there's been any form of control, a difference in the power dynamic where one person is control of all of the finances, in control of the housing, has his name on everything, then that situation is very precarious. The danger can come in where the person is aware that they are losing control of their other party, the other person, their spouse or partner. That is when it becomes dangerous. It becomes more aggressive. There can be verbal aggression, intimidation, threats, then humiliation. So all of the different forms that may have already been present in the relationship can become heightened in the post separation period, especially if the parties, the couple, are still in the same house together. That is when it's the most dangerous time. Later, after the separation takes place, then there can be all sorts of other types of abuse. You can still be intimidated via text messages, emails, phone calls. There can also be threats through the emails, threats for litigation, copying in solicitors to emails that threaten various things. There's also stalking, which can be in person if that relationship, if they're still in the same area, then it could be stalking online or in person. Then there can be coercion, where one party is forcing the other party to accept certain financial settlements, maybe even sort of derisory offers at first, where they just give an ultimatum. There's no negotiation. There's basically just an ultimatum. This is what I'm going to do. And you got no say whatsoever. Even in the relationship that's gone on for more than 10 years, it could be that that person has been in control, but that it's not been recognized through the relationship. And it comes as quite a shock to the victim survivor that they have been in a controlling, abusive relationship. And normally it's at the end of that type of relationship that they discover the abuse, and it can be when they seek legal advice or when they go to, say, a therapist, for example, or go to a mediator, and these professionals then say, it sounds like you have been in a coercive, controlling situation or an abusive relationship. If it's a lawyer, for example, in my situation, I remember the shock and the horror of being told to go to file a complaint with the police, a complaint of gender violence. Now, that was a massive shock for me. Third question. Are there certain circumstances or types of relationships that are more prone to post-separation abuse? Well, the answer is to that one, yes. Some relationships are more prone to post-separation abuse. And any relationship where there's already been abuse, obviously, right? Even if it's not been recognized, where there's been coercive control, where there's been emotional abuse, psychological abuse in that relationship, which has been hidden because you've not understood that that relationship is actually abusive. So that is a relationship where it's prone to post-separation abuse. The coercive control is, when it's present in the relationship, it heightens post-separation because they're losing an object, they're losing someone. It's not an ordinary breakup of a relationship. It's like someone who's got a personality disorder, like BPD or narcissistic personality disorder, NPD, because in the mind of that type of personality, it's not just a breakup, it's the loss of their possession. They had you as a possession. You weren't a person in their mind, you were an object. And so that type of relationship quite often moves into a post-separation abuse situation. And in some cases, these post-separation abuse it goes through courts, family courts, civil courts, criminal courts. You can then be turned around to be the abuser in a situation. They deny any wrongdoing whatsoever, situation known as DAVO. Deny any abuse, attack the real victim, and reverse victim and offender. And I was caught up in something like that myself, even though when I published my first book under a pen name and I discussed DAVO in that book, I ended up being a victim of that situation. So yes, that type of relationship can quite quickly move into post-separation abuse. Question 4. What are the most significant emotional and psychological impacts of post-separation abuse on survivors? Well, from my point of view, I can say that, first of all, there's a huge grief, a loss of your sense of self, a loss of confidence. You just spiral downwards. You in a situation of either fear, uncertainty, anger, quite often, at having this feeling that you weren't a part of the relationship. It's like the whole relationship was fake. There was no relationship. The other party can actually deny there was a relationship as well. They can say, no, there was no relationship. It wasn't a real relationship. They even inform lawyers that it wasn't a real relationship, and they'll give reasons why it wasn't a real relationship. So yeah, there's lots of that, but also the situation can result in post-traumatic stress and complex post-traumatic stress. Now, I don't look at those situations as a disorder, because the way I look at it, any form of trauma, anxiety, and stress that is a result of gender-based violence, domestic abuse, even if there's no physical abuse, even if it's only emotional, psychological, financial abuse, then I term the situation of post-traumatic stress as a personal injury. It's the same as any woman or man in a situation of domestic abuse, that if they are struck by an object, or there's any physical abuse, then that's an injury. So if it's a domestic abuse situation and it's emotional and psychological abuse, which you can't see bruises, you can't see broken bones, then the post-traumatic stress is not a disorder. It's a personal injury, and it's a natural response to the situation that has happened, and can be ongoing, because post-separation abuse starts when the breakup happens, and then it continues until there's a solution, a resolution, or the courts can step in. There has to be a way to end it. And I've known people who have gone through court 5 to 10 years to get the solution. And at this point in time, it's been 5 years for me. So yeah, the impact on survivors is quite severe in some cases, because you can lose everything. You can lose your family, you can lose your community, you can isolate, and the people in the community won't even speak. You lose your income quite often. If you were dependent, then you've got to find a way to earn an income. So the whole of the situation is impacted on your life, because the stress can heighten when there is an unjust decision. So women who were advised to file domestic abuse to the police, to give their accounts of what happened, and quite often with emotional and psychological abuse, coercive control in situations, it's not one incident, it's a whole pattern of behavior. And if then this situation is not handled correctly by the professionals, by solicitors, by police, by the courts, then that is an added trauma on top of the trauma and stress that's already present. So question 5. Can post-separation abuse have physical manifestations or health consequences for survivors? Well, again, yes, of course it can. We all know that stress is a killer, right? It's a huge impact on a person's physical well-being as well as emotional well-being. And going through litigations adds to that stress, and the levels of the stress hormones in your body rise, which then can lead to all sorts of physical symptoms and issues. For example, you can lower a lower immune system, which means that you could be susceptible to all sorts of other illnesses. It can impact your stomach, and you end up with all sorts of issues with your stomach, your heart. So basically, yes, the stress of a situation can impact your physical health as well as your emotional and psychological well-being. It can be worse if the individual who's going through all of this situation of post-separation abuse through false litigations, family court, civil court, if they don't have a support system and they're just left to navigate through the whole legal process without any support systems. How does engagement with legal systems, e.g. family court, sometimes re-traumatize survivors of post-separation abuse? Well, obviously with the family court, I think it starts with the solicitors, to be quite honest, because when you're married, you have to go through this divorce process. Now, if there's any form of post-separation abuse, then that is the time when you seek lawyers. A lot of couples don't go through legal and litigations when they separate. They can handle things themselves. You actually don't really need solicitors unless it's really complicated and there's a lot of money involved. And then I think that's where quite a lot of the conflict comes in, because some solicitors may not be really ethical. And I've heard situations of women where they've gone to seek the legal help and they're told, don't mention anything to do with the abuse. So they're going into a situation where they know there's been abuse, but they're being told by legal professionals not to mention abuse. And then they enter into the family court arena, and they can't say anything about what's happened to them in order to protect their rights to a fair hearing in the court with the family court judge. And I think that is wrong. And there's been a lot of women being vocal about this in different social platforms. And the other thing is that if there is a situation where there has been the abuse has been reported to police, and then it doesn't go any further, for some reason it's like dismissed by the police, the CPS or whatever, then I think that is another trauma that happens post-separation, because they just believe that they're going to get protection, when a lot of the time they don't get protection that is meant to be there to help. And going into the court situation, like I said, the family courts, quite often the judges and even the legal professionals don't understand the post-separation abuse. They don't understand that the other person is a high conflict personality, either with an unrecognized personality disorder, perhaps, and is wanting the conflict. They don't take responsibility for what they've done in the relationship, and they just think, right, that's it. I'm going to court. I want this, I want that, I want this. And that's how it goes into the litigation abuse. The legal intimidation starts first, where they tell you what they're going to do, and then they basically take the action that they're going to go to court. And then that can be repeated over and over. And like I say, some women spend up 5 to 10 years going through various litigations before they end up getting out of that situation. So last question. How does post-separation abuse affect a survivor's ability to rebuild their life, find employment, manage finances, or maintain social connections? Well, it's a very, very difficult situation to actually start to rebuild their lives. They obviously can't start to rebuild their life until the litigation is over, until any of the legal part is finished and done with, because the stress of the situation that you're in, especially if you then have PTSD or complex PTSD, which then impacts all your whole life, you are in a situation where you feel stuck, where you can't move forward, that your self-confidence has been eroded, your sense of self has been eroded, and you are in survival mode all of the time. You're not a thriver. You are basically moving from one stressful situation to another stressful situation. And you're not sure where, if you know, for example, that you are being stalked online and you've had trolling comments, that situation can interfere with what you want to speak about, what you want to do online. Say if you want to make a business of something, then that situation, knowing that the other person is still trolling your social platforms and stalking all of your social media, that has an emotional impact on that person. So rebuilding is quite difficult. If the person wasn't working and needs to find employment, that's another situation. How can anybody be competent enough to go out and seek employment when they are in a very stressful situation of post-separation abuse? It affects your memory and it affects your life. And yes, having a wage and having a job is one of the things that you need. But to be quite honest, finding a job and starting over while you're still in court, I think is a very difficult situation to be in. Trying to manage finances again, while you're going through stress, grief, anxiety, uncertainty, and you move between the different lower emotions of fear, sadness, depression, anger. All of these emotions impact your creativity, impact your decisions, impact your whole life. And so even just managing on a daily basis is really, really difficult. I've heard women who say that they just can't get out of bed on a morning. They don't want to do any housework. They can't function. A lot of the time they've got sleep disorder where they can't sleep at night, and so they're trying to function the next day when obviously they haven't had enough rest. So yes, it's very, very difficult for anybody who's going through a post-separation abuse situation where they've got litigations that are dragging on and on, that there hasn't been any financial settlement, and they're not sure what the future holds. They can't plan anything because they can't work out what's going to happen next. It's a very difficult situation to be in, and it affects your friendships, it affects your social connections in the community. And I found that I wasn't going to be silent. And so I have been quite vocal. I have printed articles. I published a book, and I wasn't going to remain silent about what happened. But a lot of other women are unable to talk about what happens because they are silenced by family court. Because if they decide to speak out, the family court can come down on them quite harshly. And I know of cases where women have published something online and have ended up in jail because of it, because they are in a family court situation, and the judges don't take kindly to publications of information about the abusive situation, or even what happened behind closed doors in the family court. So that is another big thing of how survivors of post-separation abuse can't get to rebuild their lives. It's a very difficult situation, not easy to just get into a situation where you can be happy about what's happening in your life, to plan ahead. And a lot of women are left with nothing at all. So they can be homeless, they can be left with no sense of self, they can end up in a situation where they're in a refuge, they can end up in a situation where they're living in a car. I've known 2 or 3 women in the UK who have been in that situation, living from their car, and not having any financial security is another one. For me, my situation has been similar. The financial security wasn't there from the start. And when I did manage to sell a pension asset, which was supposed to be 50% of my future pension for when I was 67, then that pension asset disappeared quite quickly after I paid off tax debt and for lawyers and for therapy, and to try to rebuild my life, invest in learning new things. And that money disappeared quite quickly and left me basically with no savings at all and very, very little income generation. And so I know that post-separation abuse with involving litigation is really traumatic, and women can end up losing everything: their family, their community, their children, their home, and employment. Yes, so obviously it's a massive trauma, and rebuilding from zero, from ground zero, is very difficult. And I think some more needs to be done to ensure that victim survivors, whether it's abuse in the relationship or abuse post-separation, are given more support so that this type of thing doesn't repeat over and over again. There needs to be, well, there is now more laws in place, but I think the education of police, the education of solicitors, and a set formula needs to be followed to ensure that victims, survivors, where any form of non-physical abuse is present in the form of stalking, emotional and psychological abuse, and financial abuse and coercion is taken very seriously, and the professionals educated from police all the way up to judges. And that is the 7 questions of the post-separation abuse that I wanted to answer today. So hope you found the podcast today useful, and I am still looking out for female authors who would like to join me on my podcast, Mindset, Money, Success, and come on here and talk about your book, the reason behind writing the book, and how publishing went for you. So that's it for today. I hope you can tune in next week for another episode of Mindset, Money, Success. Bye for now.